The billion-dollar diagnosis: how pharma turned childhood into a disease. For most of human history, childhood was understood as a turbulent, curious, chaotic phase of life. Children ran, shouted, touched everything, became bored easily, asked endless questions, and struggled to sit still. What we once called normal childhood behavior slowly began to acquire a new label. And behind this shift, there was far more than science. There was strategy. There was marketing. And there was money, a lot of it. This is the story of how childhood was redefined, how pharmaceutical companies turned natural human development into a chronic medical disorder, and how a multi-billion-dollar market was engineered from the ground up. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, teachers across the United States began reporting a rise in children who were restless, talkative, distracted, or energetic. Parents were told their children struggled to pay attention or fit into the classroom structure. At the same time, educational systems were becoming more rigid, homework loads were increasing, and recess time was shrinking. Children were expected to sit still for longer hours, memorize more content, and conform to environments designed for quiet, predictable behavior. Rather than questioning whether the system was failing the children, a new narrative emerged. The children were failing the system. And when a new problem appears, industries begin searching for a profitable solution. It was during this shift that the diagnosis of ADHD, attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, exploded into mainstream culture. What very few people understood at the time was that the diagnostic criteria were broad, highly subjective, and easy to apply to nearly any energetic child. This created the perfect foundation for a new consumer market: millions of kids, millions of prescriptions, and millions, soon billions, of dollars. To transform childhood energy into a medical disorder, pharma companies relied on a three-step playbook. 1. Expand the definition: behaviors once considered normal, fidgeting, talking too much, daydreaming, high energy, were reframed as symptoms. Each revision of the diagnostic manual made the criteria looser and easier to meet. 2. Influence the experts: many of the doctors who shaped ADHD diagnostic guidelines had financial ties to pharmaceutical companies. Several later admitted they had underestimated the risks while overstating the benefits of medication. 3. Target the gatekeepers: teachers were invited to seminars funded by pharma companies, where they learned how to identify symptoms of ADHD. Parents were told that untreated ADHD could damage a child's future. Fear became a marketing tool. By the late 1990s, one company in particular had transformed this new narrative into a gold mine. The makers of Ritalin. Demand skyrocketed. Prescriptions increased sixfold. And soon, stimulant medications became one of the most profitable sectors of pediatric medicine. Pharma advertising promoted a simple idea: ADHD is caused by a chemical imbalance. But this claim was never scientifically proven. Even today, no biomarker, blood test, or brain scan can confirm the diagnosis. Many children labeled with ADHD show normal brain development when studied longitudinally. What appears as deficit in one environment often looks like intelligence, creativity, or leadership in another. Energetic children do not have a broken brain. They have a different rhythm, one that does not match modern classroom expectations. Still, the belief in a chemical imbalance gave pharma companies the perfect justification: if the brain is the problem, then medication must be the solution. As diagnoses increased, so did prescriptions. By the early 2000s, stimulant medications were being recommended as first-line treatment, even in children as young as 4 years old. At the same time, recess time in schools was decreasing, physical education programs were shrinking, screens were replacing outdoor play, diets were becoming more processed and inflammatory, sleep deprivation in children was rising, exposure to endocrine disruptors was increasing. All these factors contribute to inattention, impulsivity, and irritability. But instead of addressing root causes, medication became the default answer. Parents often reported dramatic behavior changes after the first dose: quietness, compliance, loss of appetite, emotional blunting. Many interpreted this as improvement. But compliance is not the same as health. Long-term studies show concerning trends: slowed growth, appetite suppression, increased anxiety, sleep disruption, dependency patterns, irritability and mood swings, yet the market kept growing. By 2015, ADHD medication sales in the US surpassed $12 billion per year. Pharmaceutical companies began to develop new forms: chewable tablets, flavored liquids, extended-release capsules, all targeting one group: children. Marketing shifted toward themes of academic success, better behavior, and unlocking potential. Parents were shown images of smiling kids holding perfect report cards after taking medication. The message was clear: medicate your child, and their future will improve. But behind the scenes, internal memos from several companies later revealed a different motivation: capturing the pediatric market before children could outgrow their natural traits. One memo stated, "Early diagnosis equals lifelong consumer." In other words, the goal was not curing children. It was keeping them on treatment indefinitely. Today, the US has one of the highest rates of ADHD diagnosis in the world. In some districts, nearly 1 in 3 boys has been labeled with the disorder. This explosion does not reflect a sudden epidemic in childhood brain disorders. It reflects pressure on teachers, overwhelmed school systems, parents desperate for quick solutions, aggressive pharmaceutical marketing, expanded diagnostic criteria. Many experts now argue that we are not facing an epidemic of ADHD, but an epidemic of misdiagnosis. Studies show that the youngest children in a classroom, often almost a full year younger than their peers, are significantly more likely to be diagnosed and medicated simply because they are less mature. Age, not pathology, became a risk factor. Lost in the pharmaceutical noise are powerful, evidence-based interventions that support healthy childhood development: sleep optimization, anti-inflammatory nutrition, removal of artificial food dyes, hormonal balance and metabolic health, magnesium, omega-3, and vitamin D support, reduction of screen time, outdoor movement and structured play, family-based behavioral coaching. When implemented consistently, these approaches often reduce attention and behavior challenges more effectively than medication, and without the harmful side effects. But these solutions are not profitable. Healthy children do not create billion-dollar markets. When a child is told they have a disorder, it changes how they see themselves. When they are medicated for behaving like a child, it changes the course of their development. We now face a generation growing up believing that normal emotions, restlessness, boredom, creativity, and curiosity are symptoms requiring treatment. The cost is not only financial, it is psychological, emotional, and societal. Children need movement. They need sunlight. They need curiosity, novelty, challenge, and freedom to explore. They need healthy food, stable routines, strong family bonds, and clear boundaries. They need adults who understand the difference between pathology and personality. What they do not need is to be medicated into silence. ADHD does exist, but nowhere near the scale we are led to believe. And even when symptoms are real, they are often rooted in sleep deprivation, nutritional deficiencies, hormonal imbalance, chronic inflammation, emotional stress, trauma, sensory overload, environmental toxins. None of these are fixed by stimulant drugs. Pharmaceutical companies did not solve a childhood epidemic. They created one. Childhood was never the problem. The problem was the system that refused to adapt. Instead of changing classrooms, expectations, food quality, or modern lifestyles, society changed the child, with a pill. The pharmaceutical industry turned childhood into a diagnosis. And in doing so, they built one of the most profitable markets in medical history. The question we must now ask is simple: are we treating children, or conditioning them? The story is far from over. And the next chapter begins with awareness, courage, and the willingness to see beyond the billion-dollar narrative that was never meant to be questioned.